Hello, world, and welcome to the Innovation Coaching Podcast. My name is Klaus Rostel, and with me today I have Derek Sutherland. Derek, tell me how I can help.
Hey, Klaus. So I am a peer support specialist. And for anyone that doesn't know, that's somebody who has lived experience with addiction and incarceration, in my case, mental health issues, who has overcome those challenges and is now trying to help other people overcome them as well. My challenge, I guess, the thing that I'm struggling with is this is the first time in my life at 40 years old, I am trying to accomplish anything. So it went from 0 to 100 in a span of a year. And all of a sudden, I have professional obligations, volunteer engagements that I'm a part of, some that I helped create. I have all of this stuff coming at me, and I am not doing the best at times with time management, with work-life balance, and with motivation, because I think as things have accumulated and obligations have grown, that overwhelming sense of, wow, there's so much to do kind of defeats my motivation at times. So I guess I have a very general approach to what I want to talk with you about today. There's the day-to-day struggles of a guy who's trying to do all this stuff for the first time. And then there's also the overarching goal of how can I best use my past experiences to impact the lives of other people.
Mm,
So that's kind of a brief, I think. I have one specific thing maybe we can get to later, but that's kind of to begin. That's where I'm at.
just the easy stuff, right? Just the easy stuff.
Sure, yeah, no pressure.
Let's dive into that for a moment. The first thing I'm going to poke at, Derek, is something you said, and you probably didn't think of it, but I did. You said, I've never tried to accomplish something before. I don't know you that well because we've just met, but I'm already going to call really on that one and say, that's not true because you're 40. Of course, you've accomplished things. Of course, you've tried to accomplish things. Now, it may be, and here maybe we'll get into some detail about that past, that some of the things you've tried to accomplish in the past may not all be things you're proud of in the present, but you still accomplish things, right? Somebody who has a thriving drug business and is on the wrong side of the law, well, that's definitely accomplishment. It might not be something they're proud of looking back on it, right? But it's definitely something. You were incarcerated is a nicer word for prison, right?
Yes, yes, 9 years total.
9 years, you've spent 9 years total in prison, and here you sit, a nice, welcoming, decent man who gives an amazing first impression. That's not nothing. That is an insane accomplishment in itself. You were in prison for 9 years, and you still have what it takes to provide an excellent first impression to another human being. And you're even willing to be open about that. That's an insane accomplishment. That's something I can't even dream of. And the reason I say this is not to say, go to prison, it's good for you, right? I think you probably know more about that than I do, but and also the good and the bad sides. But what I'm saying is that it's a little bit like when somebody says, oh, my ex-girlfriend had no good qualities. I was with her for 5 years. And I immediately think, that's your current narrative. That's hopefully not how it felt at the time. And I'm sure if you dive a little deeper, then there's plenty of good stuff to say. It may just not be the things you like today or the things with the person you want to be, blah, blah, blah. And our pasts are generally that. So that's the first thing I'm going to say is that if you're right now feeling this is the first time I'm trying to accomplish something, I'd say you're probably dead wrong on that. But maybe some of the things that you accomplished in the past and you tried to don't feel like accomplishment by the metric you're using now. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And as you say that, obviously, yeah, I immediately picked up on that. When I was in prison, I designed and taught several meditation classes. I authored a part of a state program book for one of the programs in the prison, which no, I don't think any other prisoners ever like done. So I am a musician and an artist as well. So I have done things. I think what I meant was a professional accomplishment, right? Like I've never had any direction. I worked in factories or construction, or if I worked at all, so to have a professional life, a professional image, to be trying to do something professionally is fairly new to me. So yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate everything you said. Thanks for pointing that out, and that was very kind of you. Thank you.
No, of course. And I think here we also hit on the next possible angle on this, which is it seems to me, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that you have a pretty strong boundary between professional and personal in your thinking. Is that correct?
I do. It seems to My life tends to now be encompassed by what I would consider professional accomplishments or goals, just because those professional things are so intimately tied to what I'm personally passionate about.
Ah, to me, that sounds pretty much like a reason for maybe having less of a divide, right? If you're doing something where it's your job and you hate it, but you do it to put money on the table, then totally understandable. Professional passions and personal ones are different. But if you're doing something you care about, then those dreams and those goals and those skill sets and those tasks, whether they're professional or personal, sometimes it gets blurry if we do stuff we like. When we do stuff we don't like, it's pretty easy to kind of put a boundary around it. But once we start doing things we like, I find it much more useful to look at a little bit more holistically, a little bit more like, oh, it's all just one hodgepodge, right? Whether you're telling a story to your kids, or you're telling a story from a stage, or you're telling a story at a stockholder meeting, or you're telling a story to your fisher buddies, it's still the same basic skill, which is storytelling. And now, of course, there are different scenes and there are different ways of applying it. But if you get better at storytelling with your kids, you're also going to find that it means you get to be a better storyteller with your investors and vice versa. So, and the reason I say this is that some of these professional challenges, or shall we say, like the demotivating stuff, are there some things, if you look at them for a moment, where you can say, you know what, I could, if I just seen this as a personal challenge instead of a professional one, then I know how to tap into methods or techniques or routines on how to solve it, right? The fact that you said you helped design things while in prison. So you weren't just there, you were actually making a difference while there, and you're an artist and you do things, right? You must have figured out somewhere along the line, or somewhere during your stay there, and probably even before, figure out how to do stuff even when the rest of the world is not to your liking. And I'm thinking, are there any of these methods or these mindsets that you used then that could serve you now, even though it's a different challenge? Because maybe it's not that different.
There were far fewer distractions. That's one thing I am finding.
Mm.
When I was in there, I had four things to stay. I had reading, learning, writing, designing classes, exercising, and a radio. You better make those five things interesting every day, all day, because that's what you got. So now I'm out here and I have video games and a phone and a TV and all of these things that can make you lazy if you just reach for comfort as opposed to striving towards growth.
Ah, I think if I was listening to us talking, Derek, I'd say, didn't this Derek guy just say one of the reasons he managed to do all this in a place where most of us would just be like not even know what to do, is because there weren't that many distractions, and now he has a life full of distractions. Maybe this Derek guy, who seems quite sympathetic, by the way, maybe he should look at his life and see, are there some distractions that can be removed?
Most certainly. Most certainly. Yeah.
Have you tried some?
Yeah. I mean, I know that inherently, and I think this is one thing that no one else can give you, and that's kind of one of the things I'm struggling with is knowing that, removing distractions, and then being motivated to do that. Like that that sense of push, or that sense of
Mm,
urgency somewhat to
mm.
actually do that. So some of the personal stuff, those are things that I will continue to tackle in new ways and try and improve. Some of the what I would consider professional stuff, even though you kind of blurred those lines a little bit, and that makes sense, are things that I do struggle with what I do. There's so many tasks that come on.
Hmm.
So I'm balancing clients, client needs, new client referrals on top of, documentation. So there's the face-to-face tasks that need to be done. There are the things that need to be done that aren't face-to-face, but that relate to that client. There are new clients constantly coming in that you have to meet with. There's the documentation behind all of that, and fitting all of that into 8 hours.
Hmm.
And then all of the stuff I do outside of work, where does that all go to? And then where does my time come? So,
Got it. Okay. Yeah, yeah. No, but that's something we can tackle. So on that, a couple of questions. The first is, how often do you time box things, right? Do you have a calendar that says in like a nice blue box, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. relax, or 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. work on new clients, or whatever it says at 3 p.m. to 5 p.m.? Or do your days kind of just become these to-do lists and a bunch of incoming and some mails and some oops, I forgot, and shit, I need to do this, or oh, I should do that because I'm inspired, right? How often do you time box?
I don't time box in that way. I do manage my calendar with anytime there's a client appointment that's on the calendar, it's a certain thing. So my calendar is pretty full, but I don't time box the way you just described. Like here's a time for documentation, here's time for this. Like that seems like it could be useful. Yeah.
So one thing I've found in coaching people, also in my own life, is that the thing when we talk about calendars, most of us think of calendars as something where we put stuff that we need to remember, right? We need to, if we have a client meeting, or if we need to watch a football game, or if we need to go to tennis, or whatever we're doing that's kind of dependent on somebody else, then we put it in our calendars, right? Our conversation here was in our calendars. And yes, either of us could have moved it. I wrote you and said, hey, Derek, I'm going to be a few minutes late. And you said, that's fine. So it's not like these are inflexible things in many circumstances, but it's in your calendar, it's in my calendar. So my question to you is, after we've talked now, what does your calendar say after this? Is there another meeting? Is there just blank space?
I think there's blank space for the rest of the day. Yeah.
And now it gets in, because blank space generally tends to be the stuff where we think, oh, I don't need to put anything there. And then that gets eaten up. The moment something's in a calendar, most of us, especially those who have calendars, we tend to respect it because it's in the calendar. Yes, we can move it. Yes, we can change it. We can cancel it. But then it becomes an action. As long as something is in that blank space, then it just gets eaten up without thinking, right? Imagine you put in today, you put in your calendar, let's say there's some white space in it. You put in 1 hour where it says create documentation for clients X, Y, and Z. And then when you're tempted to go running, or open your mail, or go pet a dog, or watch the sunset, or sit down and think of poetry, or maybe answer a few emails, then you know you can't, because that time is set aside. Just like you wouldn't do it on top of a meeting, or you wouldn't do it if there's something else that is immovable, right? So part of it is that if you put in some time boxes, it doesn't mean you can't cancel it, but it means that it's not going to go away unless you make a conscious decision. And one trick I've seen applied, and I've sometimes done it myself when I had stuff that needed to be done, was say, I'm not allowed to cancel a task. I'm only allowed to move it until it's done. And after like 7 days of moving this half-hour task to tomorrow, at some point I got tired of it and I just did it.
Yeah.
Because it didn't go away. Where what happens most of the time when we just have that white space in our calendar, we think, oh, I'll do documentation, and I'll take care of my tax returns, and I'll look at company strategy, and maybe get some inspiration from that podcast I've been meaning to listen to. And then it just gets pushed, but it doesn't get pushed consciously. It's just that the time isn't there. Where if it's a block in the calendar, if it has that purple color and it said, listen to podcast about new marketing, then maybe you move it, but it doesn't just disappear because there was no time, because it's now time boxed. Make sense?
That makes sense. Yeah. I will get rid of some of the white space on there.
And you can try, right? You can always, if it doesn't work, kill it. but it at least has the advantage that it usually tends to lead to more conscious decisions and less, oh, this just happened again.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So I was sitting here going through an outline, listening to some of your old podcasts that you've done, trying to get ideas on more stuff to speak about. Like I said, there is the overarching goal of using my past to impact lives and help people, sort of transforming the suffering of my past by transforming the suffering of someone else's present moment. That I think would give meaning to the suffering that I may have caused. So I believe I'm on the right track with that. Looking at this field of work that I'm in now, as you know, when you dream about something, you romanticize it. You don't really know what it's like. You idealize it, right? So now I'm here, and I see. Okay, so now the romantic idea is kind of gone. I have a clearer picture of what things really look like, and now I have to make some decisions on how to move forward. One of the things I love is I love administrative work. I love audits. I like creating forms. I like doing anything to do with administration. I absolutely like it. A lot of people hate it, but I don't have a college degree. I don't have years of experience. So I don't know how to market that, if I can even market that, or if I should just take the opportunities that arise, do my best, and then build a resume slowly that includes, sort of those administrative capabilities that I have. Do you think, as I look into going to college, that I would need some college experience to fit into an administrative role within an organization?
That's a good question because it's also it depends on culture, right? I'd give you a different answer in France than I would in Spain and a different one in Peru than I would in Canada. And I'd probably know nothing of those four countries compared to Denmark or the US where I have more experience. Now, what I'd say is that when you get positions in other people's companies, education has the advantage that it tells the other person in a very quick time that there's something you know how to do, right? Do you have a driver's license?
Yes.
Yes. A driver's license is a lightning fast version of saying, I can drive a car safely to a minimum standard. A driver's license doesn't tell me whether you have 30 years of experience as a NASCAR driver or whether you've just gotten it 2 weeks ago and you've actually never sat in a car outside of the driver's license. However, it does tell me that you have gotten those 2 weeks or whatever time. I don't have a driver's license, so I can't. I'm not allowed to. I don't really know how to drive a car. I've done it a few times in like safe areas, and I find it much easier to drive an automatic than something with a manual gear because there's one less thing to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
But by saying to people, I don't have a driver's license, they know, don't put this guy behind a wheel. If I say I have a driver's license, it's a way of communicating, hey, at some point in time, I actually got the certification to do this, but does it mean that people who are 40 and have a driver's license have driven for 20 years? Maybe. Or maybe they took it when they were 19 and they've never sat in a car since. But it's shorthand, right? Education is shorthand. If you have a college degree, if you've got a college degree in administration, business administration, you're telling everybody, hey, I know some stuff. If you're saying, I've spent 17 years working with administration and businesses, you're also saying, hey, I know some stuff. If you're saying, hey, I'm good at administrative tasks, then they don't necessarily know what that means. However, if you're talking to people who have time to figure out what it means, or if you can say it in a way that makes sense to them, then it's different, right? Education matters until we find out what people know how to do. I don't have a college degree either. I was a university dropout 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago. And I remembered for quite a while in my career, people would ask me, what's your degree in? They'd say, oh, that was really interesting. You're a great speaker, or that was a really nice event you ran. What's your degree in? What's your background? I got asked that a lot. And I many times thought, I should have taken that. I should have gotten that university degree. Because people would always assume that I had this master's degree in communication or pedagogical training or something. And then when I said, no, I don't have anything, usually they'd have this look like, oh, okay, well, now I think a little bit less of you, or maybe it was just in my head. But at some point it stopped. At some point they stopped asking. And partly they stopped asking because I now had enough of a professional background that the education didn't matter that much, partly because it became clear what I could bring to the table. So when you're saying, if you go to somebody, if you go out tomorrow and say, let's say you do it on LinkedIn, right? It's a simple professional platform. It's the biggest one out there. If you say, hey, I'm Derek, I love administrative tasks. I spent 9 years in prison and I learned a couple of things. One, I learned something about how to be a human being. And I'm doing my best to help others and hopefully make sure others don't need to have that 9 year of getting that degree because it wasn't all fun and games. Two, I also learned how to get the best out of the most boring tasks. When you only have 5 things in a day, you better find a way to make them all interesting. And I've managed to crack that nut, and I find that it leads me to loving administrative tasks that others hate. So if you're looking for somebody with a checkered past but a heart of gold, who's also on a mission to help others and who loves administration, I might just be your guy.
Yeah, I like that.
Right? That's not a bad sales pitch. Now, will they say, "Oh, I can't work with a ex-criminal"? Maybe some will say that. Maybe some will say, "Hell yeah, this guy sounds like just my cup of tea."
Yeah.
And most of all, they'll start by saying, "Oh, this guy loves it." You can also, you don't have to mention that, right? Depends on who you're targeting. Maybe it's part of the story, maybe it's not. The advantage of making it part of the conversation from the beginning is that you don't have a surprise moment. It's a little bit like if you're dating, right? If you go on a blind date with somebody and you don't mention your 4 kids, well, it might not be relevant, but it's going to be a bit more surprising to them on date number 4 when they find out you have 4 kids, where they might feel, oh, that's cool, or they might say, hey, I wish you'd have told me up front.
You know what I've found? I spent years and years and years trying to put off telling people about my past drug addiction and my struggles with criminal justice involvement. And what I have found is that the moment I embraced that as a part of who I am and allowed that to become part of the story of who I am today and why I am where I am, then a lot of things got so much easier and relationships got easier. Because I mean, even a professional relation, I mean, or a job, that's a relationship, you know. So that improved my life quite a bit, just being open and honest about that. That's why I told you in our discussion before this began, I have no issue talking about that. So I think it'll be interesting to see how things unfold, professionally speaking, where that path takes me. Now, let me see if you have a little insight in this. Let me ask you this real quick. With peer services, there's one thing I struggle with this is you have people who have immediate needs. They need housing, they need food, they need a job. They have all of these, you know, Maslow's hierarchy right there. They need some of those bottom tiered needs fulfilled. So there is that aspect of peer services. You meet with a person, you treat the acute needs, but there is also supposed to be a longer term engagement of, hey, I'm meeting with you. What are some of the more qualitative things we can do outside of your immediate needs to help transform your life? And where I get stuck a lot of times is I've found that if I can't meet that person's immediate needs with resources that are available in the community, I almost lose them or lose the opportunity to have that longer term engagement. I don't know that that's anything, you know, anyone can help with. It might just be the way it is, but that is one of the major struggles with peer services is people want their immediate needs fixed, but as a peer, I'm also here to sort of coach you through your recovery. And it's hard sometimes to get people to stick around longer term once if those immediate needs aren't. It's hard to talk to somebody about meditation or the neuroscience of addiction when they don't know where their next meal's coming from, understandably.
Very understandably. So here I'm going to be a little bit on thin ice because this is not something where I have massive experience of on my own. So what I'm saying here may not be true, just as a caveat. It may be useful, but it might be completely off. One of the things I do know is that when people are in bad places, right? When their life feels like it's shit because it is shit or because it just feels that way. One of the things, and this is both my experience and kind of the experience of people who are smarter than me and have done a lot more research on it, is that if somebody sees your potential, if somebody sees what it could be, instead of just how to fix, how to stop the fire, then there is a chance that you look at that as well, right? So I have a friend, Mesut, who's Turkish and who works with disaster relief, not so much with like, here's a blanket and here's food and here's something warm to sleep with, but his project is called Life After Disaster. How do you rebuild once disaster has struck? And I'm pretty sure that if you don't have a home and you don't have food and you don't have that there's like these big gaping holes in your needs pyramid, then of course that's going to be your focus. But I think, and here I might be wrong, but I'm guessing that if I came to somebody and I was homeless and things were terrible and I could just, what I'm looking for is to get the next meal and to get a roof over my head and like cover these basic needs, then somebody says, hey, I might be able to help you, but maybe not. And also, I'm happy to help you with things like meditation and understanding addiction. Then I'd say, yeah, but what do I need you for? Can you give me a home? Can you give me food? Then I'll listen. If not, then I'm out of here. Because the dream is no bigger than getting that next meal, right? Where if you come and say, hey, Patrick, things are not good for you right now, and I'm here to see if I can help you get a roof over your head and get some food and get the basic needs sorted. But more than that, I think that with what you've gone through, you can actually help other people, not in spite of it, not by trying to keep your past secret, trying to run away from it, but by embracing it. Because if you, and I'm sure you meet these people, right? If you go in, imagine you yourself as Derek going into a room, and in one place you go into a room and there's 100 people and you're trying your best to make sure nobody realizes where you came from and what your past is, right? You were there, right? And as you said, that wasn't easy and it wasn't nice and it didn't really help you. But the moment you were willing to walk into that room, stand up in the middle and say, hi, I'm Derek. I used to be a drug addict. Let me help you with something. It's a completely different feeling. And to get to that, either people need to see it on their own or they need to have somebody see it in them and then believe it. And so many stories of people who've been in and seen hard times start with somebody saying, somebody believed in me. Somebody saw beyond the 15-year-old slightly criminal youth with a troubled past and a broken household. Somebody saw beyond that. Somebody saw beyond the drug addiction or the homelessness or the whatever it is and said, hey, you've got something to offer and I can help you get there. And by the way, if you let me help you with that, I'll also do my best to help you with the basics. But if you can tap into that secret magic, whatever you have that you're not seeing, then we might be able to not just fix the basics, but completely change your life.
I think I could make some adjustments to how I introduce myself to clients that might be able to encompass what you just said. Because what I heard was, embrace empowering the other person, and then all of the resource stuff and everything else is kind of attached to that.
Yes.
I'll do my best. I like that. Yeah, that's great.
And the reason I say it is that while I haven't done the work you have, and while my past is slightly different, that I've worked with a ton of young people who were maybe not in the best place in their life, always. And the ones that I was lucky enough to have relations with for a longer time, they almost all had the same story. Somebody saw me for more than I saw myself, or for more than others saw myself, right? Somebody saw potential, Somebody didn't just see the problem, but saw the human, number one. And number two, somebody didn't just saw the human with problems, but saw the human with potential. Nobody wants to be helped by anybody who only sees a problem, right? We'd rather be helped by that than not be helped. Let's get that straight, right? People can think whatever they want as long as they give me food and a place to stay, then I'm going to be pretty forgiving. But I'm going to be much more happy if somebody helps me because they see the human and not just the problem. But I'm going to be even more happy if they see the human with potential instead of the human with problems only. It doesn't make the problems go away, but it definitely opens up by saying, hey, you've got something to offer. You've got something to bring to the world. You've got something magical. Let's see if we can get that out there.
Yeah, no, that's a great insight. I think, I'm really glad my mentor Jason connected us, and I'm grateful for all the time and that you've taken today to speak with me. I think one last thing to touch on before we have to wrap up here is all those years of addiction, years of incarceration. You spend 9 years wearing a jumpsuit, have an ID, being called by your last name, not your first name. That stuff kind of pounds into your head an identity of who you are in the world. And I know cognitively that identity is not true. That's not who I am. So in your May 16th interview on your podcast, the lady you were speaking with, you pointed out that she had a confident version and a version of herself that wasn't confident. You remember that? I heard that and I said, oh, there's me, because I love public speaking. I've given a lot of public speeches. You have to have some confidence to do that well. So I have some confidence. I like to teach, but the second I fail at something or just don't feel like I'm doing enough or doing it well enough, man, those residual identity things sort of creep back in and tell me, yeah, you're not the guy you're saying you are. You're that old guy, So I have some of that as well. That's a little bit of a struggle as I grow and develop into this new life. And I just wanted to share, I connected with your interview on May 16th,
Thank you. Thank you for that. Really, really appreciate that. I think on that, Eric, apart from saying I understand, and that is rough. One of the simpler tricks I've come across is mood breaks, memory anchors and mood breaks, right? One of the reasons that people of faith tend to have religious icons on them, people will wear a cross, so they'll have a whatever it is, right? They might have headgear or they might have something that is of religious significance. Well, one is to show the world, right? If you're wearing a cross around your neck, you're showing the world that you're a Christian. It's also because the moment you you feel it and you touch it with your fingers, it reminds you of your faith. And you look at it, it reminds you of who you are. It's like carrying kids of your family in your wallet. There's a reason people do these things. There's a reason people have these memory anchors to remind them either of where they don't want to go again or where they want to be or who they are so they can remind themselves. And there's this, to me, insanely touching story. I watch Formula One quite a bit. And in one of the Formula One seasons a couple of years ago, it ended spectacularly with a crash. One of the drivers, a guy called Grosjean, his car just went up in flames. And it looked, and this happens on live TV, and it looks like he's not going to get out of there. And then he gets out of there. And of course, he's burned. It's not as bad as most would expect. And afterwards, and this is where I broke up while I was watching that interview, he says, shit, I'm tearing up even talking about it, but we'll forgive ourselves for that because that's okay.
Yeah.
He talks about it to the camera crew, the Netflix documentary crew, and he says he was sitting in that car and he could hear his kids calling up. And the kids weren't there. Of course they weren't there, right? He's in the middle of a race. And that gave him the power to get out of the car. And the reason I mention that story is I'm pretty sure that if he has a picture in his wallet of those kids, he's going to remember that they saved him once, right?
Yeah.
Considering it's not my story, I sure got emotional about it. But it proves the point excellently, even though it was not my intention to do it like this. that memory anchors and memory triggers can provoke states of emotion strongly. For me, apparently, telling the story was enough to put me in tears, even though it's not my story. I just watched it. I wasn't even there. I just watched it in a documentary on TV. I didn't even see the race live. I definitely wasn't the guy in the burning car or his family. But what stuck with me was that power of that moment. And we all have these moments, maybe not guy on fire in car moment, but we have these moments where we can recall them, whether they're with us or it's a book you read, or apparently in my case also the Formula One moment. And if we have memory anchors, right? We all have these memories, but if we have memory anchors, if it's a piece of music, or if it's a religious symbol, or if it's a picture of your mom, or whatever it is, something that can trigger an emotional state. And we all know this, but it's very rare that we consciously design our day-to-day lives so that we have these triggers available. Because I'm pretty sure that you have some of these memory anchors,
Oh yeah.
and who remind you of who you are now, right? I don't know if it's your release papers or if it's pictures of a friend or whatever it is, but you've certainly got them. We've all got them. And maybe one thing that might be worth trying is that when you find yourself in these situations, sure, you've got your memory, but if all it takes is pulling out a picture or a thing that reminds you, then you're immediately triggering that emotional response that says, hey, don't go down that path. Hey, you know who you are, right?
Yeah. I will say that, you know, the woman I am dating now would be the thing. You know, she sent a message to my mom 9 years ago when I was in jail, facing all of that time, that saved my life. And we are dating now.
Wow.
So it's pretty remarkable. Yeah, I'm getting emotional now.
And you just did it, right? And find something that reminds you of who you are now. Because what we're up against here is not you trying to pretend you're something you're not, right? We all do that from time to time. Sometimes you're like, yeah, I've done this 1,000 times. You have no idea what you're doing. Then that's not the memory trigger you want. But in this case, you are that person. You have that confidence. You are that new person in this regard. You just don't want to fall back into old ways. And what you need is a reminder of who you are. And maybe that's a way to do that, because if all it takes is, if it's something you control, something you can pull out, show, listen, touch, something that's sensory, then in some of those moments of doubt, pull that out and you're going to be reminded of who you are. It's at least worth a try.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Thank you. I didn't expect to get emotional either.
See? See? And then that's,
Uh,
yeah,
you're a good human being, man.
thank you. Appreciate it.
You're a good person.
Then we can always dive into whether having Formula One bring you to tears is how relatable that is to most people. I think most of us can more easily understand the message that
Oh,
helped you
well,
deal with prison. But whatever it is, and I guess it illustrates it nicely, it's different for all of us, right? I might be able to see that text and maybe I'd break down, or maybe I'd say, okay, did you notice the spelling mistake, right? Or maybe I wouldn't have that, but that doesn't matter. The important thing is that to you it matters. To you it's something. Maybe it's that, maybe it's something else, but that reminder, that physical reminder to jog your memory can be pretty damn well.
yeah. Yeah, she reminded me that I had had some positive effect on somebody's life when I felt like I had only caused destruction in mine. So
Huh.
it pulled me out of the darkness, you know.
One might even say, if one was inclined to such cheap trickery, one might even say that she reminded you of your potential and not just of the problem.
She did, and now all these years later, we're together. It's wild.
Pretty impressive. And that's a good story.
Yeah, yeah,
Even better living, I'm sure, right? But as a story, that's pretty powerful, right? If you open up, you stand in a room and you say, hi, I used to be a drug addict. I spent 9 years in prison. And one of the things that got me through it was I got this message of somebody reminding me that I'm not just a problem, but I'm also a human and a human with potential. And when I got out today, she's still in my life. In fact, we're dating. If you don't have everybody in that room listening to your next words, then you're in the wrong room.
Yeah, most certainly.
Speaking of wrong rooms or right rooms, but also right timing, Derek, we're slowly getting to the end of this. And let's see if we can end it out without either of us cracking up more, because I think we've done well on that. But let's end it on a lighter note. I'm gonna do one thing first and then a second thing afterwards. The first thing is even more relevant than in any of the other podcast episodes I've done, is to thank you not just for sharing with me, but for people out there. That takes courage and that takes generosity, especially with a story like yours. Going on and just saying, hey, here's my past, here's what I struggle with. That's so far from nothing. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for inspiring some other people out there. Maybe they don't have a similar story, but they definitely will be able to recognize elements. So thank you for that. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
The second thing is I want you to take a moment. I want you to think of 3 things you take away from this, from our talk together, and share them, of course.
Well, first thing I wrote down was the time management trick, the blank space on the calendar, to put down things that I need to do, even if they don't have to be done at a certain time, so that they're visual and that I don't lose them or lose track of them. The other thing that I noted was changing my introduction when I meet clients, because so often peer services is sort of marketed as these people can help you get housed, these people can help you with resources, but it's more than that. And I think I've fallen victim to some of that as well. So I think you shifted my perspective into let me demonstrate to this person immediately that I see more in them and that that's what I am here for. And then the other stuff might come along and I will try. And then so the third thing I would say, you really, without it being my intention and probably without it being your intention, you really struck a chord in me about staying focused on the person I am, the person I really am, not what the deceptive brain messages might tell me sometimes.
I like that. Thank you. And thanks for sharing that.
Yep.
To all of our listeners out there, this has been the Innovation Coaching Podcast. You've heard Derek Sutherland and me, your host, Klaus Westel. Thank you for listening.